Kate here. Let's talk ConaN. What is next for ConaN? We have Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, where he talks to celebrity guests. We have Conan O'Brien Needs a Fan, where he talks to guests. We have Conan O'Brien Must Go, where he travels the world and meets new people. But what's next? 30 years in the entertainment business, and it's evident that dude is not gonna chill. 30 years in the entertainment business, and he still has people asking, what are you doing next? Never are you gonna stop. I think it speaks to the work ethic of someone when nobody assumes that you're ever gonna put the pen down, that you're always gonna keep moving, a shark in water. But as a fan, you get a little worried. Because what could be next? It seems like he's done it all. Traveling the world, meeting celebrities, meeting fans. Genuinely, what is there left for an entertainer to do? He's been in movies, he's been in shorts, he went back on SNL. Like, what is there to do? It seems that he's done it all. To me, he seems like a man in great need of a memoir. So I guess what I really want to ask, when is ConaN writing his memoir? Not an autobiography, though. I don't want to read more than 300 pages about some old Irish man. You know, if I did want to do that, I could go read about Bram Stoker or Oscar Wilde or even Bono. But I think it's a valid question. Lots of people, end up writing books. I'm pretty sure Richter's writing one at the moment. I think maybe the strongest argument against a memoir is, well, ConaN's story is everywhere. You can just go and watch 30 years of him. Like, it's quite literally everywhere. But I think there's a great difference in hearing a man's words and reading them. When we're speaking out loud, when we're talking to people, we're not always as concise or accurate with how we feel about a certain situation, and maybe we're just trying to get through the moment. But when someone sits down to write a book or a passage about an event, we really get to see what they're thinking and how they feel. This is kind of a big deal for people who are fans of Conan O'Brien, because he's been through a lot. Another note as to why, not an autobiography is just, as a person, I try to avoid parasocial relationships, and I don't really care about his childhood. Obviously, I respect him as a person, and, he has a life. I'm not going to deny that. He has had a life. But I think a lot of people are just more interested in what the fuck happened in 2010. Obviously, I wouldn't have this podcast if I didn't enjoy his personality or his works. But there's just something so personal about a memoir that I think a lot of people maybe are looking forward to. I also think the desire for a memoir or autobiography, any book, is that of tangibility. To touch something created, not just said, but written. It's a completely different experience, especially if you're a big reader. And I imagine a majority of ConaN's fan base are big readers. I think someone like ConaN would have tremendous insight into the way that the business used to work and how it works now. 30 years is both a lot of time and no time at all. It just kind of depends on your perspective. I make fun of my friends when they're getting close to 30 because you're so fucking old. But then it's also like, we're almost 30. When did we get almost 30? And it seems like every day gets a little faster. But in the timeline of Hollywood and entertainment, things change rapidly. So that 30 years is a complete paradox because so much and so little has happened between them. And not a lot of people have been, witness to it all. You think of somebody who started in the 90s and you see them today, and a majority of the time you're like, oh, that shtick didn't age well, or oh, they're a grifter now. But that's not really the case with ConaN. It seems that he's been able to root himself in a way that not only has grown, Because it really hasn't. If you go back and watch old ConaN clips, it's not that anything's changed or gotten more mature. It just seems consistent in a way that nobody else has been able to achieve. The reason I'm bringing this up for this week's podcast and scrapping what I originally had planned is because I was browsing the Conan O'Brien subreddit and it came up. I thought it was very interesting. What would it entail necessarily, and what would it be called, and how would it interact with us versus everything that he knows? I think logically it is the next step. But then it kind of brings us back to the original question of, well, what's next? He's been in movies, he's been in TV shows, he's been in music videos, he's traveling the world, he's got a podcast, had a very successful, TV history. And if he writes a book, he genuinely has no other choice but to become a riverboat captain. There's nothing else for that man to do. And even so, he's had an episode where he was on a boat. And I'm going to give him the credit for being a riverboat captain in that scenario, because that's the type of person I am. But seriously, just imagine 30 years and you've accomplished so much. I know he doesn't like to talk about it and doesn't see it as a brag, but a Harvard graduate, loves history, complete idiot, and he's done it all. Successful in life in every way possible, from status to job to family. That's the goal, and he's hit it. But everybody knows he can't settle. If the man settles, he'll die. If Conan were to write a memoir, I would hope that it would focus not just on this is what happened, but I would really love to know how he felt. I think when a lot of people bring up, for example, the whole Jay Leno situation, Conan was mad. We all know he was mad. But I want to read about that anger. I want to know to what extent I should keep hating Jay Leno, which, if we're going to get into, the whole late night debacle, Conan low-key did what Jay did, but to George Lopez on TBS. And, that's a topic for another time. But I just need to know. Conan often makes jokes about how he's a man filled with rage, right? And we don't really see that. We see him, he's a little toxic, but in a fun way. So what does a man who is so filled with rage look like when there is completely justifiable reasoning to be as mad as one can be? I need to read about it. But I would also love to read about his anxieties. The beginning of late night in 93. I would love to read about his fears, anything that he felt like was in his way, how he managed to kind of keep his cool, knowing that, next week this could be over. The mental strength required to just keep going, even though you're like 90% sure it's all going to be for nothing. Getting what you wanted so young after putting in so much work, and then getting what you ultimately wanted and losing it to someone else's greed. I gotta read it. I have to read it. I love learning all about different perspectives and personalities and how people react to certain situations in comparison to others. I just love it. And I think he's hiding so much of it up there. But I also understand there's only so much that you're willing to talk about events. There's stuff in my life that, was really bad and really sad, but I don't talk about it a lot because it sucks. That's not what I want my personality to be. One of my favorite memoirs is The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. And the reason it's my favorite is because it's deeply relatable. Almost every page sort of felt like he was outlining my life, my history. And that was heartbreaking because it meant people that I didn't know had to go through what I went through. Some things that I would never wish upon anyone. But it was also a bit of a relief knowing that I wasn't alone. And I think a lot of us crave that with who we may call a hero or who we may idolize. We want to read them in a way that not just makes them seem human, but makes them feel relatable, tangible. And I think a memoir is a great way to do that. But there's this dichotomy of it's already available. You don't need to read it. You can listen to it and you can watch it. It's all there for free. Why are you trying to pay $30 for a hardback when you just go on YouTube and sit on your fat ass for 20 minutes? But it comes back to my point earlier where it's totally different to listen to someone's words than it is to read them. To highlight them in a book, to annotate it saying, I've been like this. I felt this. He felt this. He's been like this. It's comforting to know that the people we look up to have failed. And it's comforting to know that they've been mad, sad, and glad. Whatever else can rhyme with ad. But I also totally understand if ConaN never wants to write a memoir. Writing a book about a specific journey or point in your life, it digs up some things that you may have thought you dealt with, but you didn't. And no matter how interesting your story may be, sometimes there's just things that don't need to be said. Especially if those people are still alive. But I think ConaN could write a very happy memoir. All the memories he's had with people who have passed on. It doesn't have to be about the trauma or aggression of the whole late night debacle, of the whole Tonight Show debacle. I think there's genuinely some heroic stories that man can tell, but he just chooses not to. Obviously, you and me, that's right, I'm talking to you, we're going to consume whatever he puts out. That's not an issue. We're going to love it, and we're going to appreciate it, and we're going to pay for it, or we're going to pirate it, depends on where we live. And that's that. But I certainly would appreciate insight that is typically reserved for the close at heart. And maybe that's me getting a little parasocial. Maybe that's me getting a little emotional. But I don't like to think about stuff ending. I don't like to imagine a world where everything stops. I never watched the last week of shows for ConaN on TBS because I don't like to know that it's over. I like to live in peace, having not seen an ending, because then it's not over. And I think maybe part of my reservations for a memoir would be turning that last page, closing the book, and it's over. This view is not subject just for ConaN. It's in every aspect of my life. There are dozens of TV shows, dozens of books, dozens of movies that I've just never finished because the story is just too good. He's gonna stop one day, and it may be the worst day for a lot of people. He's not gonna stop in a way that is null. I mean, the dude's an attention whore. He'll find a way. But the podcast will stop. The travel show will stop. And when he does, he'll write his memoir. He'll write his last page, his last word, the last bit of punctuation. And we'll all close that book together, put it on our shelf, and just acknowledge that this was the end. So, personally, I hope he never writes a memoir because I don't want to go through that. But I do think it's what's next. And I hope he puts it off for as long as humanly possible. Sometimes I wish I was born at a different time, a different era. But I know I'm where I belong. And if it's to see the end, it's to see the end. But man, would I have loved to see it from the beginning. It's a weird concept, I know, but hey, we get emotional here. That's the point. You listen to me talk about a man that neither one of us have ever met. A man that both of us revere. And that's just that. It is so interesting how someone's life can be entertaining. I think about my friends and I'm like, I don't need a memoir. I don't need to know anything else. You're enough. I've had enough of you. But with some celebrities, it's like, I need to know everything. I need to know your constant thought process. Like, what did you do today? What are you doing tomorrow? What did you do yesterday? And that's where it kind of delves into that parasocial relationship. But I think with someone who has just a long career, it's more natural and more acceptable to want to pry into it. Say, what are you doing? How'd you get here? I think there's just so much behavioral insight and wisdom that can be offered in a memoir of Conan O'Brien. I think he'd be able to put a lot of kindness and silliness into it. And if there's one thing I believe in, it's that the world needs to be more silly. I do think if he wrote a memoir, it would be a combination of just pure heartbreak and comedy. But that's probably what comedy really is at the end of the day. Heartbreak with resolution. What do you think Conan's gonna do next? Do you think he's gonna write a memoir? Do you think he's gonna make a weird video game? A mobile video game? God, that would suck. Oh my god, that's a terrible idea. He's totally gonna do that. But let me know what you think. And remember to follow. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Blue Sky, all at Let's Talk Conan.